let's welcome Keith O'Donnell from Luxembourg and Ernie from US and Mukesh from India. They will give a discussion on the BEPS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everybody. The subject we're going to come to next is an interesting one. It's a very big, broad subject. There's been a lot of change recently at a very fast pace. In fact, it makes me think, to some extent, what we're going to try and cover in 45 minutes reminds me of Indiana Jones rushing headlong through somewhere in Shanghai. This is the kind of speed we're going to have to cover this at. BEPS, as Dennis mentioned, base erosion and profit shifting, is a term that arose very recently. It was kind of a creation of the G20 and the OECD, and lying in there is one of the conflicts within this, which we'll explore as well, which is, is BEPS kind of a rich world creation? Is it a problem the rich world has created itself? And do the developing economies actually care about it? And I think we'll find out that yes, they do, but up to a point. So let me introduce my panel here, which is, I think, a great panel to cover this subject. We have Ernie Perez from the US. Now, Ernie has a particular interest in this subject as he works with the American Bar Association on a number of the work groups dealing with BEPS and making submissions. Then we have Mukesh, who is one of our partners in India. Mukesh is also heavily involved in the BEPS initiative, and he works on a number of key groups in India. Frank is a director in Taxand, China, and Frank specializes in international tax and M&A. So I myself, Keith O'Donnell, I'm based in Luxembourg, and I work with the Luxembourg fund industry in particular on the whole BEPS initiative, where it's had some fairly profound implications, and we've been making a lot of submissions. The background simply is that it came from concerns about aggressive tax planning by corporates in particular, so it's very much around corporate taxation, partly driven by the change in business environment, which Andy just referred to there. So the splitting of supply chains into smaller and smaller pieces from a business perspective also gets accompanied by, of course, creative tax advisors saying, well, if you're moving this part of your supply chain to Singapore, this part to China, this part to somewhere in Vietnam, this creates an opportunity to shift tax base as well. And to some extent, this has created a realization now that both in physical goods and particularly in electronic goods, all the tax rules that were carefully designed over the last 20 or 30 years don't really work anymore in this environment, and try and frame the whole action plan and what it means. Mukesh, over to you.
Thank you, Keith. I think it's very important for businesses in general, before we get to the tax fraternity, to understand that what started off as a political agenda by the G7 culminated into a political agenda for the G20, and then it became a business agenda or a tax agenda. I think this is the most important international tax reform of the 21st century. It is going to fundamentally alter the way multinationals will operate across the globe. So there are certain good elements about the overall BEPS plan, and there are certain pitfalls as well. The good elements are transparency, but it certainly is going to lead into fundamentally altering how businesses are structured from a futuristic standpoint.
Last predictions 2020 post-BEPS?
Yeah, I want to make a comment on the tax competition, because a lot of the attention has been focused on companies, but this is as much about governments as it is about companies. And if you think about governments and their laws and regulations to make themselves competitive, take Ireland and their tax rate, take the UK and their patent box regime, that has been a big driver of BEPS. I mean, a lot of the attention is on the digital economy and on companies setting up subsidiaries in Bermuda, but a lot of BEPS is countries that have passed legislation to make them more competitive. So Keith, in 2020, it's going to be interesting to see how countries react to BEPS and what changes they make. And I think that tax departments are going to have to be focused on the geopolitical landscape, seeing how countries react, and that, to some extent, is going to drive the allocation of resources and impact the business model for a lot of multinationals.
Thank you all for your attention.